Right, well, 7 o'clock, time to get started. Welcome everyone to the sixth and final session of the 50th anniversary Pilgrim at Tinker Creek Read Along. As always, we're so happy to have everybody here and looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts and impressions about these final two chapters and then eventually the book as a whole. So just a really quick overview. We have a few pictures of a event that we did this past weekend over on the new stretch of Greenway by Tinker Creek. And then we'll have a few of our upcoming events that we're planning as well. And then we'll head into the discussion. And as I was looking for this week's different edition cover, I found this very cute picture of Annie Dillard by the creek. She's quite young here. I imagine that must have been taken sometime around when she wrote it. I couldn't find a date for it though, unfortunately. So yeah, we've got, oh, sorry, did someone want to say something? So here we've got some pictures from this past Saturday. We met up at the new stretch of Greenway. Rachel Pence and Mackenzie Brocker very kindly donated their time and expertise and some of their supplies to take us on a bit of a walk. The crew went plocking for a little bit before we came to the site where the two of them could walk out and collect some samples of the wonderful critters that live in the water and the sediment there. I should have gotten a better picture of all of the different ones that we were able to pick out just on this like folding table alone. It was just really incredible. I mean, we had multiple little containers like this just filled, and there was a lot of wonderful enthusiasm that day. We even had some kids from a nearby like picnic come and join, and so it was a lot of fun. So if anybody is able to come out to some of our future events, we'd love to have you. Our next one will be on April 26th. Miss Suzanne Thornley, one of our previous guest facilitators, will be leading us in a mindfulness walk. We may also have some photography, or that may be its own event later with Ashley Fellers. So we're still working out exactly the details, but as written down here, locations, times will be announced in our weekly arts newsletter. So look for that next week. We'll have that I'll set up. May 18th, that's actually going to be at 3 p.m. We'll have that advertised in the upcoming newsletters as well. Rachel Ann Morris will be leading us in a mindfulness walk and poetry workshop. It's going to be very accessible, no writing expertise necessary, so it's looking to be a very relaxing and fun thing. And Rachel Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, this is an offering that you have in the arts catalog, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of it's just a version of what I have in the arts catalog right now.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to know a little bit more about the workshop that Rachel Ann does, if you can't make that one, maybe you can order it through the catalog. Feel free to take a look there. And then sometime probably mid-May, we're looking both for the poetry walk and our presentation at the Eye with Katie Brooks, the director of the planetarium at the museum downtown. We're hoping to do it post Daisy Art Parade. This one in particular, we're hoping that a lot of our local artists and art enthusiasts might be looped into seeing what sort of really like interesting work has been created and could be potentially created using the planetarium as a medium. And Katie's going to be able to show us a lot of that and maybe help facilitate some new work. Maybe it'll be Tinker related, maybe not, or something downstream, pun unintended, of what we've been talking about. I'm still putting together our email list. My apologies that I am a little bit late, but anybody that wasn't able to join us last week, if you're in person downtown and you want to get any of our like upcoming emails, like if you want to specifically just know about like what some of these like Tinker Creek related book club related events and things that we'll be doing. I'll be making a little listserv, or if you're here on Zoom, just hop into the chat and please give me your name and email where you'd like to be contacted. And I said last week, and I am still planning to do this. I'll be soliciting some reading recommendations. We've had a few during the discussion, and for just anybody that really enjoyed this book, maybe that will like some of the other ideas that the crew has. So I see a few in the chat already. Thank you very much. So we've got, I'm sure, a lot of thoughts to share today. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into our discussion of chapter 14. Although if anybody wants to do the email really quick, I'll give us a few minutes. All right, thanks everybody that's adding these. Yeah, I know on Zoom the chat can be sometimes hard to find, at least on my devices. I'm like, where'd it go? All right, well, if everybody's ready, I'll go ahead and start. I wanted to start us off with one of the earlier quotes that I'm sure tickled some of you as well, with some of Annie Dillard's characteristic irreverence, sort of, and funny little random thoughts that she interjects between the very profound meditative ideas. The one, despite the wind, the air was moist. I smelled the rich vapor of loam around my face and wondered again why all that death, all those rotten leaves that one layer down are black sops roped in white webs of mold, all those millions of dead summer insects. Didn't smell worse. So moving on, I thought that this some of the things that really stood out to me personally, and I'd love to hear any of your thoughts regarding this as well, was a sort of stillness versus movement, and like the essence of things, and leaving. There's a sense of leaving. So that's sort of the themes that I had in mind when choosing quotes. But please, as always, feel free to just like interject anytime and give me your thoughts. If anybody would like to read this second quote that I've chosen, please feel free. All right, well, I'll go ahead. Oh, Katie, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. A kind of northing is what I wish to accomplish. A single-minded trek toward that place where any shutter left open to the zenith at night will record the wheeling of all the sky's stars as a pattern of perfect concentric circles. I seek a reduction, a shedding, a sloughing off.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it took me a moment after I first read this one to realize what she meant. Initially, that shutter was regarding a camera. I was thinking of a window. And also that, as is pictured here really beautifully, I think that what she's getting at is like the singular core of a thing, that if you are standing at the center, gosh, what is it called? It's like a polar, I looked up the I looked up the Wikipedia that I got this picture from. It's like a celestial pole or something like that, where it looks like the sky moves around you rather than you very, very gently moving, as opposed to the stars so far away. So that seems like it would be a really amazing experience to have. A similar sort of quote that jumped out at me, if anybody would like to read this one.
I'll read it.
Sure, thanks so much.
Sure. The death of the self of which the great writers speak is no violent act. It is merely the joining of the great rock heart of the earth in its roll. It is merely the slow cessation of the will's sprints and the intellect's chatter. It is waiting like a hollow bell with stilled tongue. Fuge, taste, quiesce. The waiting itself is the thing.
Thank you so much. And I'm really glad that you volunteered to read this one because I love the bird song in the background. It really adds ambiance. It's coming through in your audio, but it's perfect because
Well,
Please go ahead.
it's kind of funny because on the previous one, something that I kind of related to that is that I'm really, I love being outside. Like outside is kind of my world. But I lived in a place several years ago where I could actually sleep outside at night up on this little upper deck. And it was really neat because when you sleep outside under the stars, you actually do get to watch that movement as it goes across, or like, you know, in the evening or at night when you're falling asleep and the moon is in one area and then you wake up a few hours later and it's in another area, and you actually really get to feel what it feels like to watch it move across the sky, even though it's, you know, that's not what's really happening, but that's what it looks
Right.
like. I definitely resonated with that last quote too.
Well, that's wonderful. No, that sounds really amazing. But yeah, we've had in previous weeks multiple mentions of Annie Dillard as being a very natural, sort of naturally inclined to an almost Eastern mysticism. And I thought that a lot of this chapter really lent itself to that. The death of self, the waiting is the thing, you know, practicing stillness. And I wanted to invite us to talk a little bit more on that, or any other thoughts that you may have. As always, feel free to interject anytime. But some things that came to mind for me as I was reading these: movement versus stillness, ego dissolution, and the core essence, like when she talks about the shell being rounded down to like a sliver by the ocean waves. And this chapter did feel different to me personally, but it's interesting that she still speaks on a lot of topics that we've encountered before. And I think that that's a wonderful strength of Dillard's writing, is that she continues to revisit topics that to me feel continually fresh and interesting. And so I wanted to invite you all, how does this chapter compare to the previous ones that explore similar concepts?
I read somewhere that there's like a halfway point, and the first half is like more positive and the second half is more negative. And I guess this one is connected to seeing. And so when I read this, I thought that was really interesting to think of seeing and northing as like partner chapters.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, for me, this was absolutely my favorite chapter of the book, chapter 14. I just felt like, I wrote down, there were so many examples of the author's gift of using words. I mean, I have monarch butterflies in my backyard, but I don't ever think of them the way she talked about them. And I just felt like there was a lot of creativity in chapter 14 that I appreciated.
What about the, if you don't mind me asking, what about the monarchs, like the way that she describes them versus what you see your experience on your own? Like, what really stood out to you about that?
Based on like your experience, how did those compare between like how she described it and like what you experienced with your monarchs?
Well, I think after I read her description, I could see why she described it that way. and I think monarch butterflies are beautiful. I love to see them, but it just never would have occurred to me to compare them to an autumn leaf. That sort, the comparisons that she made um, were just something I really was attracted to, but never would have, that never would have occurred to me on my own to think of it that way.
Mm.
I think, and to me, that's a real gift when a writer can do that. So,
No, absolutely. I feel like the entire book is that's probably a main through line while reading it of my own experience reading it was just, oh wow, I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but she's so right. Or like you feel something almost like subconsciously, and then a gifted writer can articulate that.
mhm. Well, and at the end, I mean, she was seeing all these monarchs in migration. And she says from the force of its will, she was watching this one monarch. It would seem it could flutter through walls. Now, you know, a butterfly going through a wall is um, a great way to describe all the energy she saw in that butterfly. But
Katie, I like your comment in the chat. I'd like to invite you to speak up, or I can just read it because I
Sure. No, I feel like I have unintentionally made you read a lot of my little corpse.
no, I appreciate your thoughts. It's
The-
good to share them before you lose them.
Well, the same notion. She is just such a poet in this chapter in particular, but we've got a lot of milkweed in the backyard, and I've never bought. I mean, I enjoy the taste of the wild, but the notion of eating, I mean, it's one thing to eat plants, but just who out there had to eat a butterfly for sustenance to figure out that perhaps it tasted odd and perhaps it was due to its prevalence of consumption of milkweed. There's so much, she packs so much in just the drifting to go upward, you have to kind of drift. I don't have that written down like I should have, but
I know what you mean, where she I think describes a particular butterfly like catching a wind and being able to scale a hill by stopping to like it doesn't flap its wings, it just
I like,
drifts.
yeah, like just giving into the force, you could
Hmm.
actually move upward. That's
Yeah.
the notion there.
Moving by staying still. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
This is a bit of a dour thought, but was anyone else kind of saddened reading about the monarchs in this chapter? I would love to see a migration, but I was actually shocked at her descriptions because I didn't think that something like that happened. Like I didn't know that they were so dense when they flew that way. So looking up pictures for this slide was really interesting.
I think, do I remember reading somewhere, and I feel like surely someone in the group knows that there's been some issues with the milkweed being less available and that they're having trouble migrating, is that true?
They're like
Yes.
80% down.
Okay,
Okay.
wow, so there's.
They're 80%.
yeah.
No more
So-
fertilizer. No more
Oh, yeah.
Roundup.
Yeah.
If you see someone on the side of the road,
Yeah.
tell them the bees, like it's getting to a point where we all have to really stand up to those who may not have the memo or have made the connection. They might read in the paper, oh, the bees are dying, the monarchs are having issues with their migration, and then take their weed killer that they bought from Lowe's and go spray right next to Tinker Creek. And there's not that connection being made. It's dire.
That's good, that was a good public service announcement.
No,
Well,
you're right.
public service or planet service. Like it's if the bees are gone, we're gone, and if we cause the bees to die, we kind of committed what do they say on YouTube? Unaliving of ourselves.
Oh,
I
Yeah.
constantly fight the milkweed in my backyard. I guess I
Can I come and dig it out? Because I keep trying to plant some, and the bunnies keep eating the shoots, I think.
Are you fighting milkweed or pokeweed?
Milkweed.
Really?
It has an underground root,
It's,
and if you
it
don't
can
get,
be pervasive,
if you
yeah.
can't dig about a foot deep and get that bottom root out, you'll see it. And it spreads, and
We
it was
have a-
there when I bought the house, and I still haven't gotten rid
We
of
have a small stand and we keep it kind of small, because it's like, it could take over. Although I think we are the only people who've ever killed mint. We lost our mint. I was like, what, it just didn't come up one year. Like, how did that happen?
Well, if
I'm
anyone
sure
has
it takes
too
a
much
lot of
milkweed,
salt.
I'll come with my shovel. Stephanie in the chat writes, I read a book, Bicycling with Butterflies, of a woman who followed their migration from Mexico to Canada by bicycle. That sounds amazing. We'll add that to our reading list that I'll send out to everybody. Sounds great.
But in
Uh,
reference to the time gap, like I noted that too, that like she'll talk about the floods or the weather or the pond, that disappears after 100 years or just the vegetation of the South. But in all of this, there's never the commentary or the conversation that we would have today about man's effects on the environment, like it's just not there. And
Yeah,
I found that to be so interesting, that we have, it's like, this is like how things were.
Yeah.
And it's today noting anything in nature, we have to note that difference,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very sad to me.
Mhm.
It's really changed a lot. But I want to tell you a quick, fast monarch thing. So I just came here from Indiana, but I grew up here. My husband grew up in Indiana. And once a friend of his in 4th grade said, an alien has landed in the woods behind my house. You have to come see it. So he got on his little bike in 4th grade and rode out there, and it was a half a football field of dripping monarchs in the woods.
Oh, my God.
Just like you see in that picture. And he said it was pulsating.
Oh,
That's in southern Indiana, they landed, but.
that would
That's
kind of blow
amazing.
my chapter.
Or the beauty emergency chapter, right? Like, stop everything and look at this amazing thing that's happening.
I wish our friend Sharon Burnham was here tonight because she went to Mexico with her daughter
see them.
to see the migration.
I think they're north of Mexico City.
Yeah, and love that. And I was
Yeah,
thinking
but
about
they're
what we
really
see
struggling.
and what we don't see, the walking stick bug. I remember those when I was little and
Yeah.
being into the woods and seeing those in my yard. Has anyone seen those?
When I lived
Not
in
for a very long
Texas,
time.
they were all over the place, but
Yeah.
not here.
But I haven't seen them for years.
Here at the lake.
Are they at the lake? Oh, that's good to know. Yeah. Yeah. Because they're so fascinating. I just think they're so. And
They
I
really
wanted to
are.
come back to the bullet points here, because I just, starting at the bottom, her core essence seemed, and again, I've kind of said, because that's my perspective, so mindful, so present. And her ego dissolution, it just seems to naturally fade away. And she talks about, you don't have to we fight that. And then she knows how to be still. So I love, Natalia, that you bulleted those three, because it gives us, when she's in that space, we get the gift of this book. She sees, she has the detail, she listens, she's present. And then she's such a creative writer that all this just spills out.
Well,
Yeah,
as we
it's-
were walking along, Tinker Creek last Saturday, I kept wishing we knew where she was when she's, but I'm sure the bridges have changed and, all kinds of things have changed, but,
You know, I think there's an Airbnb, I'm not kidding, right where she was, and they advertise it that way, the Tinker Creek Airbnb.
Plus, I'm not sure she was in that section of Tinker Creek where we were. I think she was much further north where Hollins is.
Right.
And that's where the Airbnb is.
Yeah, we've just focused on that one part with the new greenway since it's in the city and we can do a project there and we can't do a project kind of in where the private property is.
I was surprised how big it was. It's like a little river.
Yeah.
I really was expecting Tinker Creek, like as wide as this table.
Yeah,
It was surprisingly big. It was really pretty.
Mm.
I'm gonna
It was
imagine
very
that
lovely.
She saw the tree with the old man in it though, Marilyn.
Oh, that was good.
I'm gonna believe that she saw that tree.
Oh, that
I had
tree,
it in my
the
mind's
tree I
eye.
took a picture
Yeah, the
of.
tree you took a
There's
picture of.
right near where we
amazing.
stopped, right before that, there was
That
a
was so
big tree and there was there were dents in it that looked like an old man kind of scowling. Like he didn't want us there.
The guardian.
We were on his property.
Yeah.
That's his lawn.
Yeah.
Really quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but Rachel Pence, one of our facilitators on Saturday, and our third guest guide, she says that Amy Dillard was in the Ardmore area and our field trip was near Mason Mill Park. And she also has a personal connection to the owners of the Airbnb and is in contact with them presently. So we may do something there. Really quick to also join the conversation about our visit on Saturday to the creek. Even though the situation with the monarch butterflies and the walking sticks and things, her descriptions of nature being sometimes a bit fuller than we can see now, it was really heartening going out to the creek on Saturday with Rachel and Mackenzie, because even just in that small, I want to say it was like a 2 to 3 foot square kind of very fine net that they pulled some leaves and critters out of, just like small world unto itself that they unearthed for us to see and explore and learn about was really incredible. And on the topic of seeing and being present and looking truly at what's before us, sometimes all we have is a knowledge gap and we just don't have the connection to someone that might be able to show us that. And so I'm really grateful that we were able to go out there because it was truly amazing. Like just that little amount that we collected and picked through, it just made me think, like, what else is in the creek and the forest and the dirt and everything else that I just can't see. So thank you once again. All right, so we can maybe move on unless anybody else has any closing thoughts on chapter 14. All right, so into chapter 15. I know this is a great big wall of text, but this to me was the standout section. I think it's a little further into the chapter. If anybody would like to read either of these quotes, please feel free.
It,
Sure.
or is beauty itself an intricately fashioned lure, the cruelest hoax of all? And then would you like me to?
Sure,
Great.
it's separated by a few paragraphs, but it's
Okay.
sort of on a similar train of thought. Please go ahead.
A wind rose, quickening, it seemed at the same instant to invade my nostrils and vibrate my gut. I stirred and lifted my head. No, I've gone through this a million times. Beauty is not a hoax. How many days have I learned not to stare at the back of my hand when I could look out at the creek? Come on, I say to the creek, surprise me, and it does. With each new drop, beauty is real. I would never deny it. The appalling thing is that I forget it. Oh, wow, it's beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, this one really struck me, and actually pretty topical to our previous discussion. Um, another thing that struck me about this passage in particular is I think like many faithful, you know, one is continually challenged by circumstances and, you know, challenges to whatever your faith or code is. And you need to continually reconcile with those challenges and wrestle with them, see if it reifies or shatters your belief. And I just really liked that as with the sort of religious bent that a lot of these latter chapters have. She kind of has another of these like, no, I've been through this before. It also reminded me a little bit of going to therapy. You have a similar experience where you kind of continue in new circumstances, butting up against different versions of similar things that you've gone through before. But it strengthens your beliefs. Oh, sorry. Does anybody have any thoughts about the previous quote before we move on?
I was clearing my throat. I wasn't gonna say anything, but that beginning of that, again, a wind rose. And each time she has that mystic experience or mystical experience, it seems that there's a wind somehow involved in it. And just, I bet if we go back, we found 3 or 4 examples of that. I bet there are more in there as well.
You know, that's absolutely true. There is a lot of like floating on the wind, and she wishes that she could do that. I know that she wonders about what it might be like to be a monarch or bird in flight. I think it was a thistle down. It's a really good observation. Yeah. Is it like analogous to the spirit, maybe?
And keep ourselves open to surprise. You know, it's so easy to get numb and just go through our routine and be robotic or whatever. But I love the idea of surprise me. And there's so much around to surprise us, and we miss it much of the time. And I don't think she does. I think she is pretty wide open to the surprises around her.
We got there the other day, on Saturday, there was Maggie, who, how old was Maggie? I don't know kids' ages.
Maybe 4th grade.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe a 3rd or 4th grader. And we're standing there waiting to start our flocking, and Maggie is on hands and knees and comes up with a 4-leaf clover.
Oh, I remember that. She was such a delight.
There you
Just
have
her
it.
enthusiasm.
There you have it.
Oh, and on a oh, you know what? Actually, I had forgotten to mention this, but on a less, I guess, beautiful but somewhat thematic note, as we were walking to the site where we did the specimen collection at the creek, we had stopped to chat, and I think someone was picking up some trash and I just kind of looked down at my feet. It was like maybe 2 feet off of the pavement, and there's this like mummified frog. So I found my own unfortunate frog, a la the star of chapter 1. I laid him to rest beneath some bushes, but yeah, that was a fascinating find.
It feels like Annie channeled that, right? Like that's something she would have put there for you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and probably if she had her way, it would have fallen on me. You know, it's like that seems like the likely, but Yeah, it was it was strange. I've never seen anything like it. Any other thoughts before I move on? Feel free also to bring up any quotes or passages that you yourselves have made note of or highlighted. You know, these are just ones that I liked and might thought maybe, you know, generative of some discussion.
I was just gonna say that our experience Saturday, I think, was really enriched by having a little girl there. When the things came out of the river, it just looked like a bunch of leaves and junk to me. And she spent, I don't know, 45 minutes with the tweezers picking up little animals and putting them in the,
And sorting
I-
them, yes, and doing a marvelous job of it.
and I pushed over to her a little, it looked like a snail. It was curved around, but it was all open, you know, it was broken. And I just said, well, here's something unusual. And a few minutes later, she said, oh, something just crawled out of that, that piece. And I had no idea there was anything in there, but she was so curious and just fascinated with all that. I mean, I can't imagine a child that young spending that much time picking up with the tweezers, these little things that hardly look like you felt like you'd squish them if you picked them up. But yeah, it was fun to see that curiosity in her.
Yeah, and Annie Dillard does often bring up, or at least especially in the beginning, but throughout, just the openness and curiosity of children. Also their randomness. I'm just thinking about some of the passages in which she discusses some of the neighborhood children and funny little things that she's heard them say and do. But yeah, I think it was in Seeing where she talks about young children just looking out with a sort of guileless way and accepting what they see.
I love how much she observes. Like and I haven't gotten all the way through the book yet. I think I'm on chapter 8. But it's all her observations, and like you said, you were there last weekend or whatever and took like a small section, and there's so much there to see, or even the frog that you saw that you almost missed. But there's so much out there that we walk right past it and we just don't even see it. So I love that she really stops to see everything that's around her, and then the way she can put it into words is just incredible. Like that's just magical. But the observation of what she sees, I think, is absolutely beautiful.
It really is. And hearing some of the observations you all are sharing, it occurs to me that although she does seem very natural, it seems a natural inclination and talent of hers to really look and stop and see things. She also seems very practiced at it, and it seems like a lot of the book is her learning to do it better, teaching herself, sort of refining her skills and methodologies, I suppose. Like it is a very active effort on her part, and I think I really love the use of the word pilgrim in the title. It's a journey.
The stalking chapter in particular, she talks so much about like, I'm trying to do this, and I sat and, you know, for all this time, and then I realized this is where the muskrat lived, you know, like she is actively learning and making, progress on her skills, for sure.
Okay, that water separation, the Jewish ritual. I mean, that was, so I'm just wondering how you all took this, because the actual process of getting to that water that purifies is pretty horrifying. You know, burning the heifer, a cow, taking the ashes, mixing it with the water, and then that water is seen as what will any man or woman, but man is what they're really talking about, who's sprinkled by this water is purified. So I'm wondering if she is saying because in the second half of the book is, to me, it's about death. Like you've got life and you always are gonna have death. And there's the word like fecundity, rotting. And she's saying out of that, the second part experience, which is kind of like the strong sense of that Jewish ritual. You're woken up to how pure things are, that she's seeing the world now because she's seeing the dying frog and she's seeing the decay of nature and the birth of nature, and they've all kind of purified her like the waters of separation the Jews used. I mean, is that what she's saying? Because I did read that. And she pulls old historic things, and with her observations, it's like she's doing that kind of collective unconscious thing. That's what I took it like. This is horrifying beauty. Did you all get that too? I mean, did it strike you that way? And it makes you awake.
Yeah,
Like when we were looking at all those things on that table, it smelled pretty bad. But it's what it smells like, because things are rotting in the bottom of that river and they're also growing and living. And that's what I took out of this last chapter, was that like the veils had dropped. And it was just so bright and clear, how beautiful, but actually, I don't mean terrifying, like run screaming. It's like the awesomeness of what's there is kind of shocking. And it wakes you up.
Well, and somewhere she was talking about death too, that I thought it was interesting. She said we shouldn't be afraid, we should be saying thank you.
Yes.
When we know we're gonna die. Thank you for all of life, rather than being afraid of what's next.
Because you'll miss it if you think it's gonna be there forever.
Yeah,
You don't appreciate it.
yeah.
To our consciousness, I guess.
Yeah.
And there was that other thing about the wave breast, that was so, that very strange ritual of taking a cow's breast to the altar in Jewish tradition and waving it in thankfulness, and then but she doesn't say that, she just says the wave of the breast. I had to look that up, and I went, that is really a stunning appreciation, because it's again kind of shocking gratitude. That's how I felt a lot this last chapter. It was, whoa. But it was the good whoa.
I don't know if this ties in or not, but I underlined this on page 244. I cannot in all honesty call the world old when I've seen it new. On the other hand, neither will honesty permit me suddenly to invoke certain experiences of newness and beauty as binding, sweeping away all knowledge. But I am thinking now of the tree with the lights in it, the cedar in the yard by the creek, I saw transfigured. And you were kind of talking about things transforming and the transfiguring of that. So I just love that I cannot, in all honesty, call the world old when I've seen it new, which is kind of a paradox in a way.
Well, she so obviously has had training in theology. She talks about getting a sprig from a pine tree or whatever, getting it wet and sprinkling it. I did that one Sunday to my congregation. They weren't sure what to think, but it's a blessing. It's but it's wet. And to me, it was appropriate by the creek to mention that wet idea.
Absolutely. No, on the topic of I didn't want to interrupt, but jumping back to the topic of the rituals, I haven't had a chance to research it more thoroughly because it's just not something that I'm personally familiar with. But I would say that yes, it does seem shocking, but I wonder how much of that is just our contemporary sensibilities. I would really love to know the historical context that those rituals arose in and what the meaning it carries with that history. Because I'm sure Dillard herself, being a very well-read person, clearly maybe knows that history, and maybe it's more, I don't know, broadly known to people that read and study the way that she did. But yeah, that'll definitely be something I would also like to look into.
Mhm. Okay, it kind of reminds me of, did you all watch Anthony Bourdain? It was pretty great, he'd go and travel and eat with people and he went up to the Inuits, oh my gosh, that was the most moving thing, and they literally eat seal raw like we would eat sushi. And they had the whole family in this kitchen and laid down plastic and carved up a seal raw and ate it, and everyone was, it was a lot of blood, okay? And he said, this is the most sacred thing I've ever participated in. And it's so against our sensibilities, but it was definitely where they gotten their nutrition for really the entirety of their culture. It was very moving, but it was also like, the sensibility thing you're saying, Natalia, that to them it was a beautiful, and he was seeing the beauty in it, but it was to see it filmed was like, wow. The little children chewing on the meat, but in their context, it was the most glorious thing they could be ritualizing was. that
Which
they
is
were-
not all about us, right? It gets us out, gets you outside to see.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
That's
What's
one worth
sacred
watching.
for other cultures.
Mhm.
Well, and our biases.
Yeah.
Or
Judgments.
misunderstandings,
Yeah.
I think more than anything, don't you?
Yeah, well, our context, I had an entire convening turn on its head because there was an Alaskan librarian there. There were people from all over the United States. We brought together to talk about food justice. And we had things prescribed because of the grant that we had to discuss. And so I kept using the word nutritious, which I thought was very normal. And Margot kind of put a stop to that and said, when everybody in this room says nutritious, you have a very clear idea of what you mean. And then she talked about whales rather than with the people she served. She said, people I serve in the community they go out, like it's a huge deal, like they leave their homes for months and go out to their land and hunt whale and bring it back and eat it. And she said, so I think we should use the word nourishment instead. And I thought
Nourishment.
it turned everything on its head. The other person helping me with that, like at lunch, I said, all right, we're changing the whole rest of the day, the way we're gonna approach this. So it is that, and the juxtapositions, I mean, over and over, I think she does that. I was struck, and it's another Old Testament reference, where she says Ezekiel excoriates false prophets as those who have not gone up into the gaps. And then she goes on about that says, go up into the gaps. If you can find them, they shift and vanish too. Stalk the gaps, squeak into a gap in the soil, turn and unlock, on and on. Spend the afternoon, and she italicized spend. You can't take it with you. And then the next sentence made me think of what you said, Suzanne. I live in tranquility and trembling.
Oh.
Yeah, there it is.
And it's a very like Christian thing to hear sometimes in the church circles. I'll stand in the gap for you if you're having a really hard time, that somebody's basically just saying, I'll go to the dark places. You have enough to do, just get in the shower and doing the things in front of you. Let me stand. So it's a very powerful image to think, I'm going to intentionally go into the gaps. But Anthony, that would feel like a gap to me, really, watching people kill a seal, and it's not a gap to them. But again, just stretching yourself, what are those places that stretch you, that feel different and open up a whole new world? And what is it? I mean, tranquility and trembling, I thought, yeah, that's it.
That's nice.
What is it? It's 274 in my book. It's
like that.
like a page or two before the end of the 15th chapter.
Thank you everyone for sharing. These are wonderful discussions. And I really, really enjoyed that you brought up did you say it was Inuit? Is because I think, isn't that what Annie Dillard herself references throughout the book? I know she uses the word Eskimo, which I hear is not the preferred term currently, or am I mistaken?
And she referred to him a lot. I remember and I think afterwards she says, someone said, what is with you and the Eskimos? She said, what do you mean? She goes, well, you reference them all the time. I wonder if she had visited or stayed or.
Or did she, I heard of
Inuit.
the reference of Arctic explorers.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's what an Inuit is, but I did have the reference to Arctic explorers more from the northern chapter, I guess. I don't know, that northern was inspired by Arctic explorers. I don't know if that's what an Inuit is. Does anybody know that?
I'm just looking it up. Sorry.
That is inspired by Arctic explorers who sought purification through isolation.
Okay,
she
so
came just-
actually I was, I believe, correct. Eskimo is I see described online as the exonym, meaning the non-native, a common but perhaps incorrect name for the Inuit people. So that's fascinating that you came to the same conclusion, maybe unknowingly, as Annie Dillard herself, because that does sound very powerful. Before I miss it, I also wanted to add or draw attention to a note Rachel made in the chat. She says, I always love that Anthony Bourdain considered Southwest Virginia and West Virginia as the most beautiful place on the planet, and that man went everywhere. That is true.
Wow, that's cool.
That reminds me, it's a much earlier in the book, but isn't there that quote about like if you want to find a new species, just come to this area, or so come to the Appalachians or something like that.
Yeah,
I
it's
felt like-
pretty early on. I think it's like chapter 5 or 6. I think it was during what I presented, but yeah,
Yes, I think it was.
we're Central Appalachia is known globally as a hotspot for biodiversity, which
Yes.
is very neat.
That is really cool. That's wonderful. Well, if you don't mind, I just want to call attention to a quote that I put here from, I think it's the second to last page in my book. I'll just read it really quick since we're not quite coming up on time, but we're getting there. She writes, and this is actually after the section that someone brought up in which she talks about death as something to accept and life to be thankful for, which I also wanted to include, but I figured this one would be shorter. Divinity is not playful. The universe was not made in jest, but in solemn and comprehensible earnest, by a power that is unfathomably secret and holy and fleet. There is nothing to be done about it, but ignore it or see. I personally really liked the reference to the first chapter, not made in jest, but in solemn and comprehensible earnest. I thought this was such a perfect way to encapsulate a lot of her musings and spiritual journey throughout the book of what does it all mean? Is God real? All of these things that she sort of reconciles into this is what it is, and I accept it. At least that was my personal takeaway. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Early on, I think that first week we talked about the ineffable, the what we can't explain, and she uses that right here. Incomprehensible. Although she does a marvelous job of explaining a lot, there's still the unexplained, the incomprehensible.
I love too that she gives, she really explains you have like the choice to ignore it or choose to see it. And it really is a choice. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I was just keeping how young she was.
I felt like through the whole book, to me, she's telling us things you would normally only tell a best friend. I mean, there's an awful lot she says that people would think she's crazy. But I think that's what, at least for me, draws me in as a reader, because she's trusting me to accept or consider what she says.
And hold space for her, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot of, the book is just full of things that, like I say, I think you tell your best friend, but maybe not too many other people. I mean, even the fact that she's out on the creek for a year or so, it's all unusual, I think.
I think all the time about that passage where she talks about being the sort of odd one at parties because the things that she likes to talk about, other people don't react to in quite the same way. I love that.
And she has the one part where she says, and again, it's like an aside, but she says like, at a certain, I don't know how long they'll let me just like wander around out here. So someone's gonna like make me like,
Yeah.
kick me out or, make me be more productive or whatever at a certain point. She acknowledges the rarity, of spending her time that way.
That's interesting. I had forgotten about that. I wonder if, we're inside her head the whole time and, following her path through and around the creek. I wonder if she sort of became a fixture of it to the people around her. Like people probably saw her out there all the time, and it just makes me wonder, like, does she sort of become part of the landscape for that year?
She's still alive. Wish she was here right now. She was 27 when she wrote this.
Yeah.
I'd love to know how she's ripened.
She never got another Pulitzer Prize. That was it.
That was pretty amazing.
Right out of the gate.
I don't know if you all had an afterword in your book or if you read it,
Yeah.
but I read it in mine, and it's in the same copy that Thomas has. And she talks about how you really couldn't write this book as an older person because you just wouldn't have the guts.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that that's sort of true. I do think that there's an awakeness to certain things when you're young, and also just a willingness to write stuff that is pretty bold. The older you get, the more complex life appears, and also how much easier it is to just sort of accept things for the way they are versus question them. And so that like kind of questioning distance, I think, is helpful to write a book like this, where you're kind of both really, really looking closely at things inside it, but also at just enough of a remove to comment on it in a way that, as you kind of get used to the world as an older person, it's easy to stop seeing, right? And so, I don't know, I appreciated that take on it. And if you haven't read the afterword, I think it's worth reading if it's in your book at all.
Yeah, and I have a first edition and it does not have that in it.
Interesting.
Mine doesn't either.
Yeah, I actually read the afterword in Thomas's book, which looks like this. It's a green one. I think a bunch of you guys have this copy, so I don't know, it's in there. She actually has 2 afterwards, an afterword and more years afterward in this book, where she explains how she's this is so true. Thomas and I have talked about this all the time, that when you're a young writer, you feel the need to be really like muscled and artistic in your prose and like add all the adjectives and just show people that you are seriously about your craft. And as an older writer, you don't need to be that self-conscious about it, and you trim your sentences down and they tend to really clean up. And she like says that exactly in this More Years Afterwards, which is so funny. So I don't know, they were a neat little coda to what we were reading. I think if you have them, read them.
Oh, I'm sad that my copy doesn't have those. I'm really glad that you brought them up. Maybe I'll find some in the library and flip through them and find one. No, that's great, because yeah, I have often wondered about and I've read a few things just doing research here and there and trying to find images and such, trying to verify certain claims, where I've often wondered what her thoughts are, yeah, today in particular.
I love what she says too. Like, I was thinking about today versus many years ago, when they were trying to publicize or promote her book. Could you imagine her modeling for Vogue magazine with maybe the dead? Or I love this one, right for Hollywood. Pilgrim at Tinker. It just would take away so much from the book, I think. But that's what we do now is
Yeah.
get a great book and wow, it becomes, here's the doll of the artist almost. But she
Yeah,
wouldn't do it.
the social media campaigns.
Yes. She wouldn't do it. And she
So
wanted to
true.
be an angel, or said they wouldn't know she was a woman. That was interesting too, I thought.
I wonder if she might be coming back here soon. Do we have any
That
idea?
would be fun.
Not that I'm aware. I personally doubt it from what I have heard. She's pretty settled up in the Northeast. I forget where. And as she's moving, further into her life, she's sort of slowed down, it seems. She doesn't she doesn't travel as often and such, I think is what I read on her website. So
And
she deserves her
last
rest.
last I heard, she has the house in Wick County, but I think she's failing a fair amount from, I heard from a couple people.
And I guess Mike Allen had called her for the story and they didn't, or reached out to her publicist or whatever, and she didn't respond, but.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been enough years that I'm sure she's had many, many, many inquiries about it, and can imagine maybe it gets a little tiresome.
Here's that Eskimo thing. Later, a reporter interviewed me over the phone and afterward, you write so much about Eskimos in this book. How come there are so many Eskimos? And she said, and Annie Dillard, she says, I said the spare Arctic landscape suggested the soul's emptying itself in readiness for the incursions of the divine. And he goes, I don't think my editor will go for that.
Just delightful. Oh, that's so excellent.
Isn't it?
Her sense of humor just permeates everything.
Well, I've enjoyed our discussion so much, I forgot to go to the next slide. I have just a few more discussion topics. I know we have about 10 more minutes. I think we've probably hit on a number of the questions that I have for here in the next slide. But I wanted to ask you all what you thought, if it's possible to glean if she, what how I wrote here, how do you think our pilgrim has changed? Obviously, the book is probably exaggerated in some parts. I think all the time about how Tom Gardner shared with us that some stories are borrowed or sort of tessellated around to fit the book, the broader themes of the book better. So I think it's hard to say exactly what sort of person she may have been going in and what sort she may be coming out, but through her own professions in the book, like, what were your thoughts? Because I have a few of my own, but.
And you mentioned, like, did she become like a fixture at the Creek? But also, like, we are reading the character that she created for us, right? Like, as she sat in her carrel in the library and, moved her index cards around, like, she created a character that had an arc, for this book. So maybe that's the real question, is like, what did the character, what's the journey the character was on?
It's funny, as I'm thinking about both what you just said and what's on the screen, I'm like kind of struck by how Western, particularly from a religious perspective, our concept of pilgrimage is, that we tend to think of it as like there's a line and it starts one place and it ends somewhere else, and that is a successful pilgrimage, right? Is that you ended up in a different place than you started. But Eastern spirituality probably wouldn't say that, right? That time is really quite cyclical, and you keep kind of we reference therapy, that you keep kind of winding back to something over and over again, but each time you return to it different, and you have more to add to the conversation that you're having with yourself about that thing. And I don't know, as I'm sitting here, I feel like, and this is just my personal take, that her journey feels more cyclical to me, that like all of the chapters on evil and darkness and grossness are also exploring beauty and vice versa, and that a lot of the things that she was exploring in the beginning are explored again in the end. And I don't know, I think I see something cyclical there, but I could be certainly projecting onto it. So I don't know, it's worth thinking about.
I like that.
I love that.
I think that's
'cause she
beautiful.
She also says, at, like towards the end of the book, I stood at the window and thought, I won't see this year again. Not again so innocent and longing wrapped around my throat like a scarf. And I have personally have felt like that kind of hope that's at the beginning of the book of like spring and there's new life and things are changing, and I've historically really not enjoyed winter. But this year something happened for me. I don't know what it was, but I have flipped the opposite, and I'm experiencing that kind of longing that she talks about in the fall, in the spring, because everything is changing all the time so quickly that like I feel like I'm missing it. Like I live on Day Avenue and I was away like dog sitting for like a week, and I was kind of in and out. And in that week, the cherry blossom trees that line that street bloomed, dropped the blossoms and started to turn green, and I missed it. Like I saw it driving by, but I didn't get to like walk through the neighborhood or anything. And so I really like that point that it is cyclical and you do keep coming back, but it's not a circle, it's like a slinky.
Or spiral.
Cause you just like, you don't come back to the exact same point, but there are like recurring themes as you go forward.
And every circle you see more. That every time you pass through, you go, oh, there's that I didn't see before, and there's that.
Totally.
That's really wonderful. Thank you all for articulating this so beautifully. I think it's sort of what I was somewhat clumsily getting at, but I love hearing your thoughts. I'm assuming probably it's included in most of our copies, but I took this picture in mine. It's just before the book starts, kind of where the dedications are. And I remember when I first began the book, I couldn't quite make what this was supposed to be in reference to. But then when I returned to it to look at something in the beginning of the book, I just flipped past it and I was like, oh, of course she put this in here. It's perfect. For anyone that can't see, it's a quote by Heraclitus. It says, "It ever was and is and shall be ever living fire, in measures being kindled and in measures going out." So for our final thoughts, I mean, we've discussed a lot of these things just sort of naturally. And once again, I thank everybody for sharing your insights and your thoughts. You are also wonderfully articulate. But if anyone else would like to share, just have a few starter questions. What resonated with you the most? And has reading Pilgrim informed or inspired your own creative work? Or do you think it will?
Well, I consider myself a Christian, but I really appreciated all the time she brought in other faiths. I mean, certainly no one faith has all the answers, and I wondered how that was received when this book was written, because I think that's an area that has become more open in this time than it certainly was, at least when I was in the 1970s. So I just really appreciated those gems of wisdom that she brought into the book.
And her spin on the creator, there were times that she was really ironic and funny about, like, what?
Yeah.
What was that creator thinking? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, the question of informed or inspired your own creative work. I'm really enjoying writing poetry and reading this, I get intimidated because instead of inspiring my work, it's like, oh my gosh, like I could never, and her style is different than my style, and there's all of that, and I understand that, but she just has such depth and resonance. It's sort of like, oh, I'm inspired by her, but it's a little daunting, to think about inspiring my own creative work after reading her.
A poet friend of mine has this poem that she reads as part of our like collective project. And in one of the lines, she says, every poet I know is a better poet than me, and that's the point. In some way or another, because everybody is writing from their own point on the map. Like my point is not the same as your point, and my point is not gonna be the same as Annie Dillard's point,
Not
but I
meant to
do.
be, right?
Yeah,
It's not meant to
yeah.
be. Yeah,
The like diversity in perspective.
thank you for that.
Well, that's wonderful.
Not in line with what you're saying. I never have done an ebook. I've never wanted to, but I did it because I couldn't get a copy. That's great. Unless I bought one and I have one in my basement somewhere that was given to me when I was 20 by my mother when this came out. And I could not get through a chapter. Being honest here. So I'm on the ebook and I learned this little trick that if I don't know what a termite mother looks like, did you read about that? You just put your finger on the word and you could get a picture. So my husband said, my God, you're taking like a whole day to read 20 pages, because I was going, what, I couldn't believe how much she knew. It kept, I mean, I go, oh, what is this about this wave in a Wales river? And then it'd be like, how did she know? How did she know so much? It's really astonishing.
27.
And then the fun was, all the animals she lists, I would look at every single one with a picture and go, did she know that one too? Like the dog-faced butterfly? But what is that? Well, there's a silhouette that people think they see in this butterfly, but it was fun to look it up. And I thought, that's a whale of experiences that young woman had had by the time she was 27. And she loved to play baseball like a fiend. I mean, I loved all the parts of her. That's why I kind of like to see her, but.
Yeah.
So it really, for me, it was what resonated most with the human mind is amazing. And this was a particularly wonderful human mind to look into. It really was. Pretty stunning.
She truly gave us a glimpse into her mind, not a glimpse, like a huge opening into her mind and how it worked.
Yeah, and I really liked the observation that you all made about her age being a factor in that, and that raw honesty, and even though it was curated in a sense to create a sort of characterized version of herself and her experiences, there's still something very unfiltered about it.
I wonder how she feels. Did anybody do any research on this? How she feels about this work?
She said it's not her favorite. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Speaking of beauty emergencies, I saw Maggie Smith last week and speak, and so it made me think about Annie Dillard, because Maggie said she doesn't, of all of her poems, she doesn't think of Good Bones as hers, because she said every time she sees that it's been quoted somewhere, she knows something horrible has happened. And that she just feels like it's in the public domain now. And of all of her poems, it took her the least amount of time to write. She said, I wrote it in 20 minutes. So she, it's just fascinating. She said her other work she feels like it's hers. So I wonder, I'm sitting there the whole time, thinking like, oh, this was so early in her career, and that was earlier in Maggie's. and how, yeah, so that.
I thought she said that. I think she said like she's just kind of over it and surprised that it got a Pulitzer and just sort of.
Interesting, isn't it?
I mean, suggested May apple. That
May
might-
tree?
Is
Maytree.
it May
Is it May
tree?
tree?
Yeah, which is so much later. That was like 2007. Like, I mean, in the scheme of things, that was just like yesterday, right? Like, and I wonder if it better reflects like the person that she's
Yeah, maybe you want to read it.
you know?
Has anybody read any of her other books?
No.
Not yet.
I read, well, Holy the Firm and American Childhood,
American Child.
and she has a one on writing, a slim one.
Was the style very different?
Holy the Firm is really interesting. It's very short, but it's tough.
It's a dense read also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does the childhood book explain the spring a little bit?
Well, I don't know. It's been a while since I've read it. I have to, yeah.
It does have like this like there are passages in that book, the childhood one, where like you see a totally different version of this writer, where she's writing like super narrative scenes where like action is happening and because of that, the whole sentence structure is different in support of that. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of cool to see her range when you see some of her other books for sure. I do think it's pretty common for writers to favor a book that the public has not favored as much, usually because they like it for writerly reasons or because it was hard to write, and that's exactly why we tend to like a book less, right?
Or
So-
depending on the royalty structure.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you so much for doing this.
This was really
Yeah.
great.
Oh, yes, thank you everyone for joining us. Yes, I recognize we're a few minutes over time. But really
Natalia-
quick,
Natalia,
Sorry?
you've done a terrific job.
you have.
thank you all very much. I really, really appreciate it. And I mean, I couldn't have done it without the Roanoke Arts Commission, Doug helping me out, particularly in the beginning and, answering my questions along the way. But most importantly, all of you who have joined us on this journey and will hopefully continue joining us in some of the upcoming, events and related things we'll be doing, or just, other arts events, or even just the Greenway. If you ever see me pushing my little double stroller, come say hi.
And keep an eye out on, from the emails on these upcoming events. And we really are building towards some projects, and it can be anything. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, there's some interesting ideas that are right now in their very nascent phase, but hopefully there will be some cool art down in the new stretch of Greenway. That's a hope that we have.
We will be surprised.
I know.
And you might have an idea that comes to fruition.
Yeah.
Writings that were generated. Yeah.
That's right. Well, thank you all again so very much. I recognize
you,
it's a little
Natalia.
late.
Thank you. Thank you.
And really quick, before we stop recording, once